Hello, welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast on our Azure Updates weekly show. My name is Marcos Nogueira. I'm your host for this week, as any other week. But with me, I have always my very best friend, Andrew Lowes. How are you, Andrew?
I'm doing very, very well. Thank you so much for having me this week. It's the week of changing seasons this week, right?
Yes, it's not only Azure that change rapidly. Apparently, the weather are following the same CI/CD, so
Oh
like
gosh,
continuous
yeah.
improvement, continuous deployment.
I think
Because
somebody pushed a bad update though, my friend.
absolutely, I'm waiting for the recover or to redeploy with the previous version,
Oh
because
yes.
here in Alberta, it's not like I want to say this on a pleasant way. Nice.
Well, yesterday was beautiful,
It
right?
was 22
So
degrees, I have to
we were
say.
we were lucky. So because we are each other's cohort, I suppose. Uh, we were hanging out and doing some wonderful hard work out in the sun, and it was t-shirt weather. I had to put on sunscreen, which apparently didn't fully function. I think it might have been left in the car for the winter, so maybe it didn't work. But I
Oh.
don't feel sunburned though. I mean, everybody says I look so dark today, but it's fine.
But yes, it was marvelous, and today we have a foot of snow.
Yeah, there's some ugliness outside. Somebody pushed the bad update out there. I think we can redeploy.
Absolutely.
I heard
Yeah.
Tuesday we're getting a new update. It's going to be much more reasonable to deal
Yeah.
with.
But yeah, but in this week regarding our Azure, we had a lot of good things on Azure
Mhm.
happening this week.
There was,
I
yeah, it was
I
a
have to
busy
say,
week. We had like 30 some updates,
yeah,
and it was pretty tough to kind of whittle it down to what is relevant, and what is going to stay in for good topics,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And it was a kind of a team for Azure as a developer, more like a week. Although we
Hmm.
are not developer guys, so we really need to carry down all of that, or in this case, not include for the agenda of this week. But if I have to choose kind of a topic for this week, for this podcast, for this show, this today or this week is more like a good updates on monitoring side of it. Uh,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. There's a few really kind of cool updates
yeah,
that relate back to monitoring and especially like log ingestion and things like that, right?
exactly. Log analytics, Azure monitoring. We have some few updates regarding SQL, and of course, the automation that we always love, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So should we roll the video and starting our show?
Yeah, let's kick this off.
Let's kick this off. So hang on for a moment. I just rolling the video and we will come back in a few seconds. So welcome back. Let's jump to the first one. And our first update for this week is Log Analytics Windows Agent for Winter 2021, now GA. I have to start this update and with the question that I have to ask is this agent of Winter 2021 is already been vaccinated? Because it's look like, because it's like
I wasn't ready for that
you are
question.
not ready for that. I was preparing. That's why I was starting this, because yes, folks, we're back recording this on during day. So we are bearing on snow in April. Yes, we know it should not be snowing even in Canada. Should not be snowing in April.
It's our beautiful
Late
mountain
April, I
weather.
have to say. Late April, right? Yeah, we are past the
Yeah,
midday.
we're in the second half here. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're on the downward spiral for this kind of stuff.
exactly. So, but Log Analytics Agent Winter 2021. So, pretty cool update. It's now in GA. Okay.
Mhm.
So, and this reminds me a few things. Okay. That you need to upgrade your agents that you already have installed right now
Yeah.
because it's GA, it's production ready. So, you need to do that. There are different ways that you can do it, either manual or through the command line, or if you want to go a little bit down on a path, you can use our best friend called DSC, Desired
Mm,
State
mm.
Configuration, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm always reminded of every time we see one of these log analytics updates is when we look at the command line switches, that this is really built on the old ops agents, right? So there's a lot of the switches that are actually still ops insights based,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's really interesting because it speaks to how solid this monitoring, this log analytics really, really is, right?
Yeah,
It's a well-known technology. It may have a more modern name now, but the base of it is still very solid and has had some good longevity. And it's one of the things that I enjoy about it because it, like, you just put it on and it's kind of a set it and forget it until you have some updates. And if you're not using the automation with DSC, then it's certainly something worth exploring. I think in many environments, right?
yeah,
Because it can really reduce your workload, right? So I always think of it as, if I have to do it once, okay, twice, now I'm starting to think about it. The third time, all right, how much time will it take to build the automation for this? And will I have kind of that return on investment, that ROI of, if it takes me 12 hours to build the automation for this, but I save 30 hours in the next, quarter, then clearly there's a very fast ROI on that automation build time, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And this agent is still the part that I like about this is still having the old name of the MMA, Microsoft Monitoring Agent. So it's coming from the old days of the System Center Operations Manager and all of that. You can multi-omit this agent. You still, although they did a little bit of changes along the way. If you're looking at this, and now the good thing about this is the same agent no matter which Azure cloud. What I mean
Yes,
with that is you can either use this for Azure commercial or for Azure government in this
that's right.
case. And this is good because means that if it's good for Azure government, especially in US, and they are using exactly the same agent for Azure commercial, I felt way more secure to using this. It's not that I was not secure before, but if it's the same thing and goes on the cut of all the security requirements regarding the agents, right? Why not in this case? And it's simple. It's really simple for people like us, for example, that we are always working with um, with either government or we either commercial. It's good because now we can have our own scripts and update that DSC that we always use
Hmm.
with the same version. We can reuse those scripts in this case, no matter or adapt those scripts in this case to the environment of any customer. So
Yeah, just thinking about the scripting, in the update, I do notice that this is for the release of the 32-bit agent.
yeah,
So there is 64-bit as well for the agent. And in this case, this is just the release of the 32-bit agent.
yeah, good point because I almost forgot that topic. That's why you are on the show, my friend. I have to tell you
Between the two of us, we can forget everything. It's fine.
exactly. And between the two of us, we will remember everything, right? So
Hey, I think so.
it's about capacity, right? That's the important thing. And this is the perfect segue for the next update. The next
Yeah, a
update
small
is
capacity upgrade here, right?
exactly just small, like tiny. General availability for the Azure Blob storage support objects up to now a little bit of silence, 200 terabytes in size.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's pretty big.
Yeah.
So each blob can have up to now 50,000 blocks, right?
Yeah.
And each block is now 4 gigs in size. I remember when these were 1,024 bytes for block size. Bytes
Yes.
with a little b.
Yeah. Just to make sure that everyone understands, right? Yeah.
Now 4 gigs per block. Like
Per
that
block.
is quite significant, right? It means we have less fragmentation. It means we have overall faster write and faster read.
Yeah.
The write speed is very important. We tend to take that a little bit for granted now, especially with so much cloud computing and cloud storage.
Yeah.
But that write speed is usually the one that slows us down. So large block size. Certainly, I'm not a data scientist by any stretch, and far be it from me to understand all of the hardware at that scientific level. I do know that bigger numbers are better numbers in this case.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that if we want to be honest, that is pushing this is the Azure Data Lake storage, the Gen 2, right? Because it's where is supporting the
I've
Gen
forgotten
2
how to drink my coffee today,
of the
Marcos.
data. That's okay. We are just live, so you don't need. We have like millions of person watching this.
Wait, are we live? Is the live button on for this one? No.
Yes, I did already record this, my friend. I have to say it. Although you are small this time, because if we were on the other screen, like for example, this screen is going to
that
be.
Could have been bad.
That could be really bad.
I apologize for interrupting. I'm never sure how visible all the drool is, right? So
that's okay. What I was saying is, this update is getting because of the usage of the in this case the Azure Data Lake storage. Okay?
That's correct. It's quite a popular product, right? It's really taking good hold.
And it's growing like massively because they had this before with less, and because of all of those block sizes and the size of the block and the number of blocks as well. And it's because it's Azure Data Lake where you put all the information there, and then you can transform and have all of the ETL regarding that on that location. It's a very popular. They need to grow this, which is good because allow us to just use this for way bigger sizes, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And this is going to really, I think, set a bit of a benchmark for Azure storage accounts, right? Like we've seen sizes growing 100 and 200 terabytes kind of here and there for different features. And it's more becoming the standard at these larger scales now. Absolutely. So I think we're going to be starting to see in the next little while even further growth and a little bit of standardization across some of the different storage platforms, right? The different types of storage that are present in Azure. There we go. Couldn't think of the word.
And shows the evolution of the cloud because this type of update shows that they are growing, and now we as a consumer can take advantage of that, right?
Absolutely, right. And that's one of the things that is really cool about public cloud with Azure is they have all of these teams that work in a very dedicated way to push rapidly the growth of things. So the storage team in this case is really pushing very hard, and we get to see the benefits of that, right? So once they figured out how to solve all the problems at the hardware layer, then they do the integration layers, and then they integrate to other products, and then we start to see these benefits kind of move throughout Azure, and they do all that hard work, and we just get bigger block size, more storage, higher limits. And that's really important as everything is very rapidly still pushing to cloud. We're still seeing a lot of clients that are doing a lot of migration work right now. And, last year was the push to remote abilities, kind of bringing, how do we get everybody together? So Teams was really front and center. But now that everyone is in Teams quite comfortably, there's a lot of push to, well, how do we bring all of the other things along with everybody
Absolutely.
now?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of on-prem or distributed data in many organizations. And I think this is a kind of a good foundation layer for that, right? We're going
Yeah.
to start to see a lot of support for all those data pieces coming together. I like it. I know I'm extrapolating a little bit here,
No, that's
but
okay. But it is, and I could not agree with you more, to be very honest, because it's good to see that they are pushing always the boundary or the envelope further and further and further, which makes totally sense when we pitching for the cloud and we pitching for all of these updates, that it's up to us to use it in this case or consume it, that service, totally. Um, another update that I have to say and I have to confess that is a horrible mention. We've thought that this is a nice to mention on our show. Is the general availability of Lustre AHSM
Lustre, yeah,
Lustre AHSM tool, now available to import from or export to Azure Storage. So it's not my wheelhouse. I have to confess. I never use Lust, but from what I was reading before of the show, and when I see this update I was reading, it's pretty cool because Lust is a file system that is an open source, a parallel file system that supports the requirements for the HPC. So this is related to the high performance computing, the HPC part of it.
definitely.
And it's really cool that now they have a tool. And this tool, if you follow, I apologize for the ones that you are listening. I highly recommend going to the Azure blog in this case, to see this update, because
Mm.
there is the tool over there, the file system hydrator, for example, that is available on GitHub, and
Yeah,
that is the tool that you use in this list to just using that. So it's pretty cool. And the part that I like about this update is basically this is maintenance by Microsoft, and that's the part that is, it just makes us now surprised that every time that we have these open source things right now, it's not more a surprise, but it's still good to see that is under the Microsoft, in this case, GitHub kind of branch, right?
yeah. So I did dig down a little bit here on this Lustre file system hydrator tool, and it's a Python-based tool, right? So this allows an organization to take that Lustre data and import it into an Azure Storage account. You can use it with Key Vault. It's able to generate SAS tokens and put the SAS token into the Key Vault and use it. You can link it with a VM identity, and it's fully RBAC compatible, which is,
Yes.
absolutely fantastic. So I feel like this one, as a tool set at least, may have been developed very specifically to support a specific use case with a client and help them to migrate data securely into Azure. And one of the things that, like you said, is really cool is when we see these open source tools published for everybody to share. Now that it, of course, is open source, but it uses the proper methodologies, right? So it's using SAS tokens, it's using Key Vault to store those tokens, and it integrates with existing RBAC in your current structure, right? So you can assign roles to it versus assigning people and direct security groups and things like that. So this is one of those kind of things that is like a little. I know it's just an honorable mention, but it's like a little hidden gem kind of underneath it, right? Because what we see is this simple on the surface kind of migrate your data here, but underneath there's all this thought, all this architecture and design that's gone into this file system hydration tool, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's really cool in this case to have it. So yeah, and then again, it's developed by Microsoft. Not very. many people just download this part, but and it shows the part of the HPC, because the HPC world is an open source world, right?
Hmm.
That you really are taking advantage of all the compute, and you are building your system and on top of that, and that shows that specific part regarding these updates, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting how Microsoft really has truly evolved with the kind of that internal mindset that it's okay to share this kind of tooling now. And I love when they make it generic so that we can all consume that. So
Yeah,
if, say you and I are working together, we have a client that needs their HBC, their Lustre file system moved over. We now have a tool to help us migrate or hydrate that data into an Azure Storage account. And we don't have to start from scratch with all of that Python development, right? So
absolutely.
Microsoft has done the hard work here and made it publicly available and said, hey, if you have these file systems, go ahead, you can take advantage of this tool to help you out.
Absolutely. Moving to the next update is about Azure SQL.
Mm-hmm.
General availability updates from April 14, 2021. In this case, these updates, what they are talking about is Azure SQL is related to the Azure SQL Managed Instance, well, I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically an update regarding some of the things that we already mentioned here. That is what's called service tags for user defined routes.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
if you didn't see the podcast about that, please visit that podcast, because we have very deep dive of about service tags, and at that time, if my memory doesn't betray me, it was related to firewalls,
It was, yeah. We were talking about firewalls and integration of different devices and
about
user
these
defined
service tags,
routes.
right?
Yeah, and all of the service tags and driving automation within the whole user defined route structure through those service tags.
Exactly. So
Yeah, so it was totally a deep dive session, and it's really worth listening to. In fact, I may refresh my memory by going back and rewatching that one as
yeah,
well. But yeah, like check out Azure Centric on YouTube. No matter where you're
yeah.
hearing,
Oops.
listening, or viewing this, and just yeah, I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. So yeah, go have a look, have a listen, check it out. Don't forget subscribe, right?
Exactly. I have my subscribe button.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember I came back last week, and yeah, for those of you who don't know, we just run things kind of raw around here,
Completely.
and sometimes we have what we call rebuilding the system.
Yes, and we have some kind of how I can say this, graphic kind of enhancements. Sometimes some hosts have bigger heads than the other ones, something like that. So far, we don't have any issues. So far, we never know how we can moving forward. But this, let's go back to this update. What I like about
Absolutely.
these service tags, if you are new in this case to the channel, first of all, thank you. And the second is the service tags. What it is basically a kind of a name that you give, a kind of an alias that you give when you are configuring all of those things, right? Especially the subnet configuration and all of that. That even that they already have some of those components behind it, so the system knows automatically when you are using those service tags what does that mean. So for example, if you are using Azure Cloud.region, it already knows that everything is within that region that you are. Or in this case, on that podcast, that specific update that we're talking about was firewall rules. So if
Mhm.
we put, like, for example, Office 365, he already knows that is not the IPs, is all the URLs and so on and so forth regarding those service tags for using defined routes. In this case, for SQL managed instance, we're talking about, for example, subnet to virtual subnet. So you can use, for example, even if you update those subnets or if you add more subnets, the advantage of that is using these tags, you don't need to go to the managed instance to give or to reconfigure again with the new subnet. Automatically, by using these service tags, you are adding that subnet to the rule in this case, and
Mhm.
automatically it's configured. That's the beauty of it. So you configure once, and then it's just to up to date that configuration, not a configuration, that change on your environment, and will update it automatically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's super useful if you want to take that configuration, especially as part of a migration, right? So if you're doing like a VNet migration, for example, service tags are going to really help make that less painful. There's no easy way to do a VNet migration, but we can make it a little less painful, right? And I like that it takes all of that custom DNS mapping with it. You just have to have, and the deep dive article in the MS Docs does a really good job of explaining it, because Lord knows I won't. But if we have, if we have complex rules in the NSG, we have the user defined routes. You have custom DNS, but also public DNS, and because we can have a little blend, right? So if you have all of these complexities in your environment, and odds are if you're using managed SQL, it's a complex environment, because that helps to simplify things for us. So those things are moved along. They're ported really through those service tags to other subnets, and those configurations kind of move along throughout your configuration, and it's really, really helpful. But it also means that we can manage things using automation and also policy with those service tags, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the part that is really useful for these service tags, is the useful and way to just configure once, and even if you need to change the environment, you can use that. Absolutely. Moving forward, now we have one of those topics that is really cool. That is the public preview of SAP NetWeaver in North Europe and updates in the cluster monitoring. So again,
Now you said NetWeaver, not Dreamweaver, right?
NetWeaver, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Why?
I just always think of Dreamweaver every time I see Weaver in
Ah,
the
okay.
title.
No, no. This case, it's a product inside of SAP. That
It
is
is.
the NetWeaver. It's not the Dreamweaver in this case. No. Although this update is really cool, because I have to say it's the way that you can have a lot of organizations that are moving their SAP workloads to Azure,
They are.
and one of the challenges is how to monitoring those, right? And especially because SAPs have their own proprietary way to monitoring and all
They do.
of that configuration, and they have their all of that language, ABAP language, and they use a lot of Java as well, and the SAP ANA database. We've been mentioning a lot of SAP ANA monitoring as well, but in this case, it's their portal, right? And what I like about this update, it's another horrible mention over here, but it goes from the Azure monitoring specific for SAP solutions, what they call AMS. So
Mhm.
Azure monitoring for SAP. And what it does on over here, it's now you can monitoring this component that is the SAP NetWeaver with ABAP in this case and with Java as well. So first of all, is in preview. So we always have to come to that conversation of preview is not to deploy in production. Uh,
Absolutely.
I think we already beat that horse to death in this
Yeah, we can
case.
leave it for a couple of weeks.
I think
Yep.
we can. But this update is only available on a few regions. So East US, East US 2, West US 2, and West Europe, first of all. Okay. So there are a restriction regarding that. The second part is again is a way that they want to have one-stop shop in this case for the SAP technical monitoring to basically monitoring a kind of subset of the SAP NetWeaver, like the SAP NetWeaver with ABAP and Java, SAP HANA database, SQL if you are using or not, Pacemaker, and of course the Linux side of it as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right. And like you said, we've had a lot of updates. I'd say over the last few months, really, about SAP, and especially more recently with SAP monitoring.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see this one pushing out because it really allows Azure Monitor to function kind of internally with SAP when it's on Azure, right? And as you know, it's very critical that we monitor not just all of our Azure workloads, but in SAP, it is such a critical system. And Azure has really done a lot of dedicated work, I want to say, in that area. So we know that there's bigger hosts, there's dedicated hosts, there's special hosts that are made specifically for SAP HANA compatibility. There's very specific configurations we need to do when we configure SAP on Azure. And this is part of that, right? So it's part of the full ecosystem for SAP. So it's really nice to see this kind of also entering,
Yeah.
right? So, the users of SAP can count on not just their internal monitoring within SAP, but can also start to take advantage in their test environment, in this case, of Azure Monitor and those alerts and building out dashboards and things like that, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really cool stuff that's going to be coming from this, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Moving to the next one is the public preview of functions upgrades in Azure Monitoring Log Analytics. So this is a very cool one. Although it's still in preview, this allows us to just, instead of having the custo log queries, to have now function, in this case queries, using Azure Monitor on Log Analytics on your environment. So allow us to just increase even more, in this case, the integration with the function upgrade on our Log Analytics. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. And in these, so they're called solutions, right? Solutions functions. So these are really pre-built Azure Monitor functions
Yeah.
that are used in solutions and insights, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just making it more usable, making some pre-canned queries really more portable. And I think as part of this, we're going to start to see the ability to, we can always write our own solutions and workspaces, workbooks already, but it's going to, I see this one kind of carrying forward, making it easy to build custom functions and make them a little more portable between your different solutions.
Yeah. And the part that I see that I like about that is the part that now you can easily or more easily about these functions that you can have is using, for example, I know that's a redundant, but Azure function to just kind of query to see, to try to investigate, to try to automate a little bit further in this case, and then doing something with that result, for example. That's the
Absolutely.
part because um, on Azure function is going to be very complicated, for example, to do a custo query, right? And using those ones that we have is going to enhance even more the uses of Azure functions and the automation logging, or the automation part of it that you can have regarding the logging that you have on your system. That's the part that I like. I want to explore this more. Still in preview, so when it becomes GA, we will be able to see it more, even more solutions, like you mentioned, that we can take advantage from that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be really nice as this one comes out. It's in, I think, public preview, right? Public
Public
preview
review,
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
public
So
review.
when it hits GA, unfortunately, I don't have any kind of testing tenants that have that deep log analytics data that I would want to query on. So I just have it in my production tenants for me. So once it hits GA, I know I'm going to be digging into that one pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving to the next one, general availability of the new Azure Policy built-in definitions for data encryption in Azure Monitor.
It
This
is the week of Azure Monitor again here.
it
Yep.
is. It is the week of monitoring log analytics, like we said on the starting, right?
Yeah. So this one is pretty neat because it's about the customer managed keys. And they talk about different scenarios where you can use this and it's integrating with your key vault. So you're really starting to see kind of some of these security best practices kind of filtering out using different language and really trying to show Azure customers how to take advantage of these secure builds in the real world in kind of easier to understand terms, is how I like to think about this.
Yeah.
So for this one, we talk about Azure Monitor logs clusters should be encrypted using customer managed key and audit if Q Analytics cluster is defined with the customer managed key. And I think that I just found a typo because I don't know what Q Analytics is. I think it's supposed to be an A for just analytics.
Oh yes.
So,
and I have to say that
you're welcome. We've pointed out, I
I
think
read
this is our
this
fifth
at
one.
least two times, and I read this before the show, and I say yes, but I never. Yeah, Q Analytics. It's not.
Well, so here's the reality, right? There's so many terms for all of the different products and services. And when I gave this a pre-read, honestly, I thought they were talking about some new service. So I was hoping that that was going to be in the intro of it, but it wasn't there. And it's just a standard English typo. That's all it
I
is.
think it's a fat finger because it's a Q&A, and
Exactly. They're
they
side
are
by
on the
side on the keyboard,
side
right?
by side. No, in this case it's one up and
Well,
bottom.
it's up, yeah, but
Yeah,
it's still
but
it's right.
it's
It's
still, I think
within
it's a
one.
fat finger mistake, but that's okay.
Nonetheless, you're
Nonetheless,
supposed to you're supposed to audit your log Q analytics.
yes,
In this case, cluster, when it's defined with a customer managed key.
yeah,
So this is really about starting to build out the analysis and the alerting based on the fact that you're using secure encryption keys and key vaults. So this is a really kind of a neat thing when you start doing this. And I've used customer managed keys on log analytics before. And it's kind of an interesting thing because once you set it up, it's really set it and forget it.
yeah,
It's just a little bit of forethought up front. You put the keys into the vault. You tell your log analytics workspace that it needs to communicate with the key vault for that key, and that's it. Like there's nothing else to it. Honestly, there's no magic. It's just about planning it out like anything in IT. We have to define our requirements. In this case, it was using customer managed key. And when we do that, you set it up and it just runs. It just works. And I didn't find it to be impactful in any way other than it met the customer's requirements of having self managed keys.
yeah, absolutely. And what I like about this update as well is it's attached to a policy, so it's attached to the Azure governance side of it. So now
Mhm.
you can make a standard for your organization. So instead
Yeah.
of being all over the place, and now for this you have one key or one type of key, in this case customer managed keys, and for other one you are using key vault, and for other one you are doing this, and then it's a monitoring system, so we'll have access to all of those systems, and sometimes depending on how you are configured, you have some elevated privilege as well, right?
Mhm.
Now you are saying, no, I want a policy in this case that will put all of my keys that I need for the systems inside of, for example, a cluster, inside of Azure Key Vault, for example, and that's it. That's the part that I really like about this update is that governance. It's always kick me the part of the governance of creating a standard. So we know what we are doing, we can standardize, and because it's Azure policy, you can even audit what you already have right now and kind of collect the report in a way that you don't need to enforce, but you can always know what you are being using, and especially for us that we are coming usually to those environments that they already built, and they asking, okay, how you can make it better, right? Do your magic. Usually, I really rely a lot of times on Azure policies, on the
Absolutely.
audit mode in this case, to just
Yeah.
give me what is a deviation from what I want to see it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's something that's really kind of underrated when it comes to Azure policies, right? Is because you can see at a glance once it's set up, especially,
Absolutely.
and we want to emphasize in audit mode first, because we want to just do that, right? We want to just audit. We don't want to enforce until we fully understand everything that policy is going to really do.
Yeah.
One of the things that is my, I think probably, well, you know what? I think it's probably my top thing that I love about Azure Policy is how you get to see the enforcement, not the enforcement, the adherence,
Yeah.
right? So you can see, okay, I have 50% of my log analytics workspaces are compliant with this policy and 50% aren't. So you can go to the ones that aren't and drill down and see why. What was part of your rule set that triggered it to be non-compliant, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the value is right there, because that does the work, like you're saying, for us, and we present that to the customer and say, hey, this is why you're not compliant with this set of rules,
Yeah.
and we can support you. We can write the rules. We can change this one innocuous setting from audit to enforce, and then many of your software systems will no longer have access because we also didn't think about how they use these other keys.
Absolutely. So yeah.
That's why we have to be careful with the enforce button.
Absolutely, and it's always a a good way to understand what tools that we have to just and what is in this case the way that if you enforce what is going to happen in your environment, right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's roll this forward to the next one. Do you mind if I read the title for this one?
Absolutely.
So GA for Log Analytics Workspace name uniqueness is now per resource group. So we've seen this, and I think the example that comes to my mind to relate to this is storage accounts, right?
Hmm.
So when we type in the name for a storage account, has to be like all lowercase. It has to be no spaces, no hyphens, which kills me. I love hyphens, and no weird characters, right?
Yes.
But it has to be unique per resource group as well. There's other requirements, so please, people, don't get too upset, listeners and viewers. We're not talking about storage account requirements in this case. We're just the log analytics workspace naming.
Yeah.
So for the log analytics workspace name uniqueness per resource group, this is a really good thing because you can end up with multiple workspaces for log analytics very easily. And it's nice to know that there's going to be no duplication. So the duplication will have the same name. So it could be Andrew's Andrew's workspace, for example, right?
Yeah.
And then the GUID is going to be different. So you could have 3 called Andrew's workspace, and they look all the same
Yeah.
in the graphical interface, but the GUID is different for each one. And there could be different things stored in each one, of course. But then when you go to reference it, say through CLI, for example, in Cloud Shell, and you call Andrew's workspace, and you get data that doesn't make sense, it's because we didn't enforce unique naming.
Yeah.
And this is going to resolve a lot of those challenges. So it's just kind of the constant evolution, right? So, when we've started to see a lot of log analytics workspaces now, I want to say very popular with all of the clients I've been working with recently in the last year or so. They're starting to do more monitoring. They're starting to aggregate that data. And more importantly, you can put expiration dates on it, right? Which I absolutely love, because monitoring data is sometimes a liability. If you keep it for 10 years, someone's going to ask you, well, what's been the uptime of system X over the last 10 years? And you may think that you're at 2 nines, but when you pull that data, you're going to find you had, so Saturday patching. And you have to apply all of those complex rules for uptime in your organization back for that whole data set of 10 years.
Yeah.
No thanks.
And it's not only that. It's like I'm going on a little bit more deep level. That is like when you're adding a VM to this log analytics workspace, right? When you're going there and you say enable, for example, the metrics, you need to select. So when you select that, now you have multiples, because I see a lot of organizations putting like VM monitoring as the name of the workspace. Cool, I have nothing against that. But now you have like 300,000 gazillions VM monitoring, okay, because they want to have that logging inside of resource group, which is unique on the resource group, right? But then when you adding the VM that you are on a different location, now you have VM monitoring for a lot of different. And you need to go to find what is the workspace resource ID that is global uniqueness, okay? To go there, and now starting to go on the goods, on identifiers, right? To go there and enable that to the portal, because the name is exactly the same, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. You're absolutely right.
that's why in this case, for me, when I'm at the customer, and I always reinforce is, for me, should be unique within the subscription.
Yes,
because
that's correct.
It helps facilitate not having these types of drama, because this is drama. For me, it's just drama. And now
I
it's
never
good.
recommend that log analytics storage is done per resource group. I always recommend it per subscription.
And it's not only that. It's like, yes, you can have a log analytics resource group on the free tier, because we have to think this back. I think it's worth going back one step. That is like the log analytics workspace. You paying by the amount of ingesting data per day. Okay?
Yes, that's right.
That is what you're paying. Of course, that if you add space, it will do that as well. It will add the space as well. But the majority, let's call it this way, the majority of the cost of analytics is by injection data, right? So if you have multiple of those, that you are above the threshold of the free tier, that is 500 max per day, and holding for 7 days only, okay, it could be okay. You have only 7 days, and then it's going to be okay to have a log analytics per resource group, because usually, if you think this a little bit down the road, you have a VM, for example, that you can have a resource group. You can have the agent sending information to two different log analytics, and all of that. That's
Hmm.
okay. But now you are starting to get a little bit. You are starting to overcomplicate things, because, for example, if you have update management, and you know where I'm going right now, right? Because if you have update management, you need to have a log analytics one, or at least a
Okay.
workspace, right? And you need to have an Azure account, and you need an Azure Automation account,
Hmm.
and you need to have all of that specific. And sometimes I'm seeing a lot of things happening, sending information to two different places. You are duplicating information, and you are doing all of that, and you are paying almost the time, okay, for that, because one, you want to keep it, like you said, for longer than 7 days. If you want to keep it for longer than 7 days, you need to go and pay as you go at least,
Hmm.
right? And now you are starting to pay. So if you have a lot of those type of log analytics, right? Multiple log analytics, pay as you go, probably is going to compensate you on the matter of cost to have a bigger one, like a top tier. I think it's above 100 gigs per day, something like that. I think is a top tier, if I'm not mistaken. That you're paying once, and you can now dump all of that information over there. And now you have one log analytics that you can query. You centralize everything. It's just a matter of managing the storage, nothing
Hmm.
else. So I see these on the perspective of try to simplify that, because now I can attach, for example, other systems like Azure Sentinel to that specific log analytics, and I only have one place that I can ingest data. Because if you have, in this case, Azure Sentinel, you are paying for ingest data as well. So now you have, instead of multiple locations, right? You have just one that you are collecting data from. So it's trying to simplify things that a lot of organizations, they want to try to segregate, but I don't see, depending, of course, that those requirements. I have to say that I don't see the value. I see that they are trying to complicate things that should be simple.
Well, and I think we're talking kind of about the same thing
Hmm.
from two different perspectives. We're both talking about
Absolutely.
top-down design when it comes to data structure. So we're talking about deduplication.
Hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And we're talking about not just unification, but really cost optimization as well, right? So these are all things that we have to consider. So, like you say, if you have 15 storage accounts for log analytics that you're paying just like the pay as you go tier, the bottom paying one, just above free. So if you're paying like 15 of those, I don't know the numbers, so forgive me, but it's probably cheaper to have one that's premium versus 15 standards,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, like we just have to map those things out, but it comes back to design,
Yeah.
right? So if we design it like that, we're going to understand what our cost is. And this is something I think that is a deeper issue than just log
Completely.
analytics. We always try and stress with all customers of Azure that it should be design first, not
Exactly.
go in and do first.
Yeah.
It's not a free for all. This is a data center, and we need to treat it like it's a data center because that's what it is. It's a subscription. It's your data center.
Absolutely. and
Yeah, so
and
we
and
have to
sometimes it's not
design.
easy, it's not even easy to like make those changes, because if you make those changes, um you might
Oh, you
lose
could
some
be
data.
impacting all of the VMs for a customer by doing
Exactly.
that, right?
You have to retake out, in this case, the agent. You have to make sure that is not connecting to that workspace, and now you're connecting to the other workspace, and all of that is effort. And sometimes I think sometimes happening that it only becomes available when you reboot the server, for
Yeah,
example.
because well, a lot of those log analytics agents use registry keys, right? So we have
Exactly.
to reload the registry, and in Windows kernels, that's a reboot.
Yeah.
So it's a way better than it used to be.
Way
No
better, but
argument
yeah.
here. But Windows 10 is very stable, actually. Um, my only complaint is my head shifts around a lot sometimes, but I'm just going to blame Windows 10 for that because
Exactly.
there's nobody else to blame.
I think it's time to move to the next one.
I think so too.
Yeah. So Azure Automation for the System Assigned Managed Identities is now in public preview.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take this over?
Oh, sure. I can talk a little bit. Yeah. So managed identities, this one's actually kind of cool, right?
It is.
So another kind of hidden gem update for us here this week, right? So Azure Automation is now supporting the system assigned managed identities for cloud and hybrid jobs in the Azure public and government regions. So this one is really fun because what it means is that we can use those managed identities to authenticate to any Azure service that is supporting Azure AD authentication.
Yes.
And that is pretty much everything Azure because it's all built on top of Azure AD.
Yeah.
Not to hit any sore spots here, but we know that Azure AD is the foundation layer. And as long as that's nice and happy, I'm going to say, then everything you like once you authenticate to that, you have access to all things that your role and your permissions give you access to.
Absolutely.
So this is another way to build increased stability, increased ease of management. And one of the things I thought was cool, I did read kind of the MS Docs deep dive, I want to say a little bit on this one when we were talking about our preview and selecting our articles this week, right? The thing that kind of got me excited about this one was that we don't have to renew the certificate used by the automation run as account.
Yes.
So anybody that has had to fight with certificates and automation run as, this is going to be groundbreaking.
Completely.
So
although it's in preview, so don't start doing this in production because it's still in preview and they might change and all of that.
That's a good point, right?
Yeah. But
so I know I do have in my testing tenant a lot of automation, as you know.
Yeah.
We talk about it often, but this is absolutely going to be tested out for me. I'm really excited about kind of leaving certificates by the side. I love doing automation. I don't love working with certificates. So I'm a big fan of Azure Key Vault. I'm a big fan of managed identities and proper RBAC with the role-based access, right? Because it eliminates the need for me as an administrator to work with certificates on a regular basis, right? Infrequently, yep, I'm fine with that. On a weekly or monthly basis for all of these different automations and things, I'm really starting to enjoy how Microsoft has been developing automation in that regard to eliminate the need for hands-on cert management.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. That's really the beauty of it. Last but not least, we have the user data through Azure Instance Managed Metadata Service, now generally available. We did cover this, if you remember, on another episode about this Azure Instance Metadata Service. And it's pretty cool that now we can see this as a GA. So this service is the service that provides information about the currently running virtual machine instance. So meaning that you can now see if that machine, for example, a virtual machine or a virtual machine scale set instance, what are the endpoints that you are using in this case the ARM, the Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so it's a REST API that is available, okay, to a non-routable IP, like in this case the APIPA one, that you can use without accessing the VM. Pretty cool. Now that is becoming GA, and now we have that information that we can see all of the things inside of the VM, but without logging into the VM.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really cool. And this is like console plus one, right?
I never thought about that. Console plus
V2 of
one.
console, maybe? I
Yeah.
don't, well, you know what? Maybe that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Because you refer sometimes to ARM as like Azure V2, and so
Yeah.
maybe this is like console V2.
Yeah, probably.
So it is though. It's a really good way, and boot diagnostics, like bringing all these things together for reachability. I want to say ease of administration for VMs, and making it easy again to apply roles to this kind of thing, right? So. If you have a hardware team, the translation to that at Azure virtualized level is really this, right?
It is.
So this is where they would be working and helping to diagnose problems like, hey, the VM didn't boot because of this. We'll change this setting and do that, and it'll be good. Or maybe we need to contact Azure support and get this VM moved to another cluster. I think you can redeploy to a new cluster anyways, right? But
yeah.
you may need to contact support for different things sometimes. Anyways, yeah, before I deep dive into reasons why VMs don't start.
Yes, but it's a cool update that now is in GA, and we can see it, that part. With that, we come to the end of our show this week. Very sadly, I know. So I want to thank you in this case, Andrew, for being part of another week of the Azure Centric podcast on our weekly update shows, and to thank you to listen all of this so far. So if you are new to the show, don't forget to subscribe, to smash that like button like you guys are doing. Comments
Absolutely.
are
Yeah, the
are
user feedback
marvelous.
has been just amazing.
It's just amazing, and everything else. And I did forget to mention this on the introduction.
We did, didn't we?
Yes,
Oh
to
my
thank you
gosh.
everyone, but
How
we don't
embarrassing.
forget at the
Thank you
end.
very
So
much.
so it's the good thing about the end, right? So once again, thank you, Andrew, and thank you that you are listening. I hope that you like this week show, and see you next week. Bye.